What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, and I just got done watching the latest Nintendo Direct. It was another one that was focusing on indie games, and while some of the stuff there were pretty interesting, it's hard to ignore the fact that most of them were ports or just games that have been around for a long time already. It didn't really have anything that was fresh, new, and really shocking to see. Now I'm okay with that because I don't need every single announcement trailer from Nintendo or anybody else to be this crazy mind-blowing experience. But I decided to go on Twitter, and I noticed that there is actually a lot of people that are a little bit disgruntled and upset about the fact that it seems like, in their words, the Nintendo Switch is just becoming an indie machine. It's been so long since they had a giant first-party experience from Nintendo. There certainly hasn't been a new Mario other than freaking Mario Tennis or something along the lines of Legend of Zelda. It's just kind of becoming something like, it seems like Nintendo is taking a step back and letting just anybody who has a cool game step forward and throw it out. Now, this is something that I think is a smart move, but it might be backfiring. Now, the reason I say it's a smart move is, in general, you want your platform to be just absolutely flooded with good games. Now, notice I'm actually saying good games. A lot of these indies are stupendous. Games like The Messenger, which is actually coming out here in a couple months, or a couple days here, this game is stupendous. It is so top-notch. But I'm sure that to just somebody who hasn't tried it or somebody who hasn't researched it, it looks like every other indie game. It has a cool 16-bit art style. It manages to try and be a big homage to retro gaming while being modern at the same time. Now, that's awesome, but it's hard to ignore the fact that at this point, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of games that look like this. Things that seem like they're trying to fit into this new genre of very old school inspired games. I mean, seriously, right now, if I just open up my Nintendo Switch and you see what I have installed right this moment, you're going to see that I have basically a 16-bit version of something like Dark Souls. I have a lot of stuff like Overcooked, which is definitely a very modern indie game and one that I really think is fantastic. But then you have right next to it stuff like Saltic Sanctuary, which is another game that is sort of like a 16-bit Dark Souls. Then we have Curse of the Moon, which is definitely a very cool 8-bit version of something like Castlevania. And even Cosmic Star Heroine, a game that sort of, in my opinion, plays like an old school RPG. These are games that are also fun, but I think that in general, the audience is starting to get a little bit burnt on that. And I can't say that they're wrong. I think that Nintendo is trying to have this thing where they want to make sure that anybody who has some money to spend has great options. That's how you keep yourself afloat. But if we just rewind time a tiny bit and look back at the launch of the PlayStation 4, this is actually something that Sony did as well. They actually went to game jams to find indie developers who already had a game that was about 90% done, and then they just straight up paid them to put it on the PS4, to make it where in the early year and a half when there wasn't a ton of stuff to play, there would now be extra options of things to see on the eShop, to see in the PlayStation Store, to want to spend your cash on, and basically to stall until that next big game came out. Because let's face facts, it's things like God of War and the Resident Evil 2 remake. Those are what sell consoles. Indie projects are something you buy for fun in between the bigger stuff. Even if you happen to be somebody who is absolutely obsessed with some really cool indie games, eventually you're going to get burnt on the fact that a lot of these look and play quite similar. So I think that Nintendo is kind of coming into a weird space where I think they're finally starting to accidentally exhaust their fan base. I mean, look at what the best-selling game so far this year on the Nintendo Switch has been. It's Octopath Traveler. Now this game, in my opinion, is damn near perfect. It does so much stuff so freaking right. But again, it's another game that sort of has a 16-bit modern style to it. And while this is so freaking good, if you're just a casual gamer who's stumbling into that, you're going to think, man, what happened to Nintendo? What happened to the new big games that are going to stir things up and get me talking and make me want to line up to try them? I think that Nintendo is kind of, well, I feel like they're getting a little bit stuck. I think that they're definitely cooking up the final processes of stuff like Bayonetta 3 and probably giant big reveals for things like the new Yoshi, but until those are ready, they have to just keep people there, hanging out and not unplugging their Nintendo Switch. You need to keep your audience invested, and the only thing they really can do is just open up the door wider and wider for new indies. And that's really it. I'm okay with this, but I definitely think that they need to try and do something big, and they need to do something soon. I know I've seen a lot of people over the course of 2018 beginning to mumble the fact that they're getting a little bit tired of all the Nintendo Switch ports, because a lot of stuff, as great as it is, whether it be Wolfenstein or really big crazy shooters like Doom, these games, when they come over, are already old news. The Nintendo fan base is really grabbing onto them and playing the heck out of them, but it's still one of those things of, there's definitely nothing that's coming to the Nintendo Switch at this point that is just crazy, mind-melting, like, wow, this game is so great, you need to run out right now and buy a Nintendo Switch for your friends just so they can see this game. I mean, really, what is like that? I like the fact that Fortnite's on there. I like the fact that we're going to be getting Smash Brothers soon, but I mean, there's just nothing that really jumps out the way it needs to. I think that, if anything, Nintendo needs to try and do something to really try and reinvigorate the fan base. Nintendo fans, in my experience, are definitely very, very loyal. They want to try and play everything possible on this single handheld console. I mean, if possible, they would play every single game you could possibly imagine. I've seen people straight up beg for impossible ports, like stuff like Master Chief Collection, just so that they can truly have every single experience they love on one machine that is both portable and good at home. But I mean, it's just coming to that point where I think that they want something that is more grand in scope. But what does this mean? I think that it really comes down to the fact that Nintendo needs to come out with some trailers, and I think the sooner the better, to try and reinstate fan confidence. To say, hey, I know we've been showing you tons and tons and tons of indie games, and I know there hasn't really been a massive first-party release in 2018, but stuff is on the horizon. You're about to get a Pokemon game, which is probably just for little babies, but there is a real Pokemon coming out in 2019. There's a real game that's already coming up. There's already some big stuff that is out there to blow your mind. They need to try and remind people that stuff like Metroid Prime and probably Animal Crossing are right on the horizon. But is it enough? I guess the thing that's really amazing to me is I'm impressed the Nintendo Switch just keeps selling as well as it does. If anything, its numbers keep getting stronger and stronger. And I think that part of the fact is that, in general, the Nintendo fan base is interesting because they don't buy stuff that's necessarily the most bright and shiny thing. And I think that Nintendo kind of bets on that. Nintendo knows that once they make Mario Odyssey, it's just going to keep selling and selling. They don't need to really come out with DLC. They don't really need to make Super Mario Maker on the Nintendo Switch, even though we want it so badly, because people are just going to buy whatever's on the system in general. So whether it be a tiny indie or a giant experience, people are going to be relatively interested and happy with it. I guess I'm just coming to the point where, personally, if I'm being really brutally honest, I'm slightly disappointed because I wish that I had something to really be epic. I mean, at this point, I would be very, very happy if we just even got some ports of stuff that's already been out there. Like, bring over stuff like A Link Between Worlds, the 3DS Zelda game. That game isn't necessarily my favorite, but it'd be so cool on the Nintendo Switch. Bring over stuff that maybe didn't get all the attention that it deserved, like the Wonderful 101. Basically, I'm saying you need to try and make sure that the Nintendo Switch has a big and constantly changing library. That way it can match the popularity of other platforms. The PS4 is kind of epic when I think about it because it just keeps getting huge blockbuster, multi-million-dollar projects back to back, month after month, crazy things like Spider-Man and Fortnite updates, and then look at the store and you're also getting free games that are crazy and backwards compatibility PS2 stuff from a million years ago. Like, the PS4 is clearly trying to make it where Sony is very obviously dumping a ton of money into it to make sure that it has the power and force to keep thriving. In Nintendo Switch, I think that they just are coming down to the fact that every single studio is doing everything they can to make games as quickly and as awesomely as possible, but they're still just not quite there totally. I want more. I'm not unhappy. I'm not mad at Nintendo. I just wish that I had something to play now instead of having to wait for an entire year before that next giant bombshell release to come out. I want Zelda, I want Mario, I want Animal Crossing, I want Metroid, I want Castlevania. I want to play these games. I want to put the money down. But if you just show me another little trendy indie game that has a retro art style and a couple freaking people standing around in a market selling cat cakes, it just doesn't get me hyped in the same way. But these have just been my thoughts. What do you think about this? Are you somebody who already owns a Nintendo Switch, and what have you been playing recently? Or are you somebody who's been a little bit on the fence and has been waiting to get one, and you're just kind of waiting for that next giant game to finally cement your purchase? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. Man, I like this stuff. Man, I just wish that at this point we'd maybe even just get some 16-bit sequels. Like, Nintendo, give your freaking rights of something like Advanced Wars to one of these indie studios. That way we can get a Messenger-style sequel. Give us Golden Sun. Give us something! Oh, hey, I was just playing a little bit of Grand Theft Auto on my Darth Vader PSP. Are you curious what I'm going to come out with next? Well, if you click this button, you'll be subscribed to be the first to know. Also, if you click over here and here, you can see my latest review and my latest top 10. I promise, it was super good. Or it was really bad, and I'm sure you can just make fun of me in the comments. Either way, it'll be a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching.